Prime Minister,
about the economic...
Your scaremongering does not stop at the economy, does it? What comes first, World War III or the global Brexit recession?
The world is changing with accelerating speed.
To lead in shaping a new world order for the 21st century.
We don't want a nuclear war! We don't want a counter war! We don't want a nuclear war! We don't want a counter war!
This week, U.S. Defense Secretary Ashton Carter accused Russia of nuclear saber-rattling. He promised to counter what he described as Russian aggression by increasing military buildup through NATO's presence near Russia. NATO, a key aspect of U.S. security policy. Now, the Baltic Sea region is quickly becoming a friction point between Russia, NATO, and the U.S., with NATO military exercises underway and a lot of close encounters. I was joined earlier by James Carden, Washington correspondent for The Nation magazine. He started by telling me for what NATO is preparing.
It was recently announced that NATO is going to be sending in 4,000 troops to Lithuania and Poland as part of the European Reassurance Initiative. That's a $3.4 billion initiative designed ostensibly to reassure our NATO allies in light of what has been happening in eastern Ukraine. In addition to that, the United States has sent in the USS Donald Cook, which is a missile-class destroyer about 50 miles away from Kaliningrad. Now, Kaliningrad, a lot of Americans don't know, is a Russian port between Poland and Lithuania, and they have a major naval base there. And so the effect of these maneuvers by the United States and NATO has been to increase tension in the region.
So what exactly is the aggression that they're worried about? I mean, this is a lot of militarized presence that they're gearing up for.
Yeah, what they claim to be very worried about is a repeat of what has happened in eastern Ukraine.
The entire Europe must calm down in the knowledge that the Pentagon would do anything in order to protect Europe from Russia. On Monday, the Pentagon deployed a pair of F-22 fighter jets to southeast Romania in an effort to deter hypothetical Russian aircraft. The US Air Force aircraft arrived at the airbase on the Black Sea, less than 400 kilometers away from the Russian military stronghold of Sevastopol on the Crimean Peninsula. The US Air Force has deployed F-15 Eagle air superiority fighter aircraft to Iceland and the Netherlands. Several NATO countries as well as non-members, such as Finland and Sweden, are sending planes to Estonia for the first massive Air Force exercise to feature civilian airport aimed at training for interception of aircraft losing contact inside Finnish airspace. The two-day exercise called Ramstein Alo-1 will kick off at the Estonia's Amari Air Force Base next Thursday. It will be involving warplanes and air crews from Belgium, Spain, and Poland, as well as non-NATO members such as Finland and Sweden.
This is an emergency broadcast. This is a direct message to the Department of Defense, all four branches of the military, active duty, service members, veterans, their families, state governments, local governments, and the media. We are going to display 100% irrevocable proof that there is a global move, not just here, but all over the world, to militarize police and to put standing armies on the streets to suppress the population and to carry out political operations.
It seems strange that at the same time when we have huge military drills, military hardware movement and FEMA training in the US, in Europe we have 600 members of various European military forces recently conducted an exercise in the German North Rhine province ready to be deployed in the event of civil unrest or war. Why in the world Italy's streets would be patrolled by Chinese police? That shows a very strong message that Vatican will be partially protected by China during a major crisis. Finland Defense Minister Jussi Niinistö said Russia doesn't pose a threat to his country. But then why would Finnish government send a reminder to 900,000 soldiers to prepare for war with Russia? Because it's a mind game tactic used by the mainstream media. On top of that, additional 40 guided multiple launch rocket systems and warhead rockets worth $150 million sold to Finland, just in case NATO stockpiles military hardware in Norway.
So we have what are called pre-position gear, both in caves and on ships, and it allows forces from the United States to come out and fall in on gear that is already forward deployed versus bringing all that gear with us.
M1A1 tanks, amphibious assault vehicles, artillery, and logistics equipment support NATO allies.
So any gear that is already forward deployed both reduces cost and speeds up our ability to support operations in crisis. So we're able to fall in on gear that is basically ready to go and respond to whatever that crisis may be.
It always takes time to deploy forces to a certain area. When you have material, equipment, pre-position, you can fly in the personnel and you will be faster ready to conduct operations. So that's always an advantage to have that pre-position in stocks in Norway.
The equipment will support Exercise Cold Response 16 starting later this month.
We fit easily together when we are operating. The last 10-15 years we have been operating together in Afghanistan, other places, and when you move to Norway you will always operate in 3 dimensions because we have a long coastline, we have land territory and the air.
President Obama is back at the White House this morning after a week in the Middle East and Europe. Air Force One touched down Monday evening at Joint Base Andrews outside Washington. We spoke with the president yesterday in Germany in a wide-ranging interview. He had just announced 250 more American troops will go to Syria. They will help in the fight against ISIS, also known as ISIL.
Us dismantling ISIL is a priority, and although we are not going to be sending ground troops in to fight, we are going to try to find out what works and then double down. And one of the things that's worked so far is us putting special forces in for training and advising of local forces, but also intelligence gathering.
Let me pivot to China. Your Secretary of Defense has been in the region. How aggressive do you see the action in the South China Sea? And do you worry that they will cross some line in which you'll have to respond more aggressively?
I've been consistent since I've been president in believing that a productive, candid relationship between the United States and China is vital, not just to our 2 countries, but to world peace and security. We're a lot better off with a China that feels confident.
It's not a zero-sum game.
It's not a zero-sum game. What is true, though, is that they have a tendency to view some of the immediate regional issues or disputes as a zero-sum game. So with respect to the South China Sea, rather than operate under international norms and rules, their attitude is we're the biggest kids around here and we're going to push aside the Philippines or the Vietnamese. But it doesn't mean that we're trying to act against China. We just want them to be partners with us, and where they break out of international rules and norms, we're going to hold them to account.
And what about North Korea, finally?
North Korea is a massive challenge. Our first priority is to protect the American people and our allies, Republic of Korea, Japan, that are vulnerable to the provocative actions that North Korea is engaging in. They are erratic enough. Their leader is personally irresponsible enough that we don't want them getting close. But it's not something that lends itself to an easy solution. We could obviously destroy North Korea with our arsenals, but aside from the humanitarian costs of that, they are right next door to our vital ally, Republic of Korea. One of the things that we have been doing is spending a lot more time positioning our missile defense systems so that even as we try to resolve the underlying problem of nuclear development inside of North Korea, we're also setting up a shield that can at least block the relatively low-level threats that they're posing right now.
President Obama has launched the U.S. most massive military buildup close to Russian and Chinese borders. This piece of information clearly shows a very strong message of the beginning of a major conflict between major superpowers such as NATO, Russia, and China. As you're watching this video, we have missile defense shields being set up and being installed in Israel, in North Korea, Eastern Europe, and Russia. When United States is testing its new intercontinental ballistic missiles, we have Canada asking to join US missile shield to enhance national security. Canada has suggested it may join the US missile defense shield. Then we have the installation of the US missile shield in Eastern Europe along Russian border. Russia has opposed US and NATO plans to deploy anti-missile systems close to borders with Russia. Washington says that the anti-missile system would not threaten Russian security. Russia will restore a missile attack warning station near Crimea to counter an increasing NATO activity in the Black Sea. We have 4,000 cruise missiles pointed at Putin that would enable Obama to deliver precision-guided non-nuclear airstrikes anywhere inside Russia in less than an hour. When Putin calling Obama's new missile shield in Eastern Europe along Russian border a direct threat, we have Poland setting up a new missile shield. And then we have Romania setting up a new missile shield. We have US anti-missile base in Poland put by Obama, and in Kaliningrad we have Putin threatening to put nuclear missiles there. We have Putin activating S-400 defense systems all around Russian border with Eastern Europe, and we have nuclear missile systems patrolling Moscow streets. We have Norway and the US planning to establish a new military radar post in Vardø, Finnmark, in addition to the already existing US Globus 2 radar system. Let me show you on the map where all the missile defense shields are being set up and being installed in Eastern Europe. Just look at this map. Here we have Putin in Moscow, placing S-400 defense systems all around Moscow, and we have some in Kaliningrad. Here we have Obama setting up a missile defense shield in Poland and Romania, and putting radars in Norway. And in all these countries we have NATO and US military training at unprecedented scale. Watch my new video on military training and military hardware movement by Putin and by Obama in these countries. The link to my new video, as always, will be below in the description box. Just a little bit more than 70 years ago, we had a great war between major superpowers. Today, in the same place, on the same map, we have the same superpowers in the face of NATO and Russia preparing for a major war. Just remember, only a little bit more than 70 years ago, in the same place on this map, millions and millions of people died fighting for the same forces that are preparing a major conflict today. My biggest concern is that during World War II, there was no nuclear weapons available in such a big amount that is available today. And in the same place on this map, there was no nuclear power plants, so the war was limited in scope.
While the Allied forces lost hundreds of thousands of citizens during the course of the conflict, at least 27 million Soviets were killed during what's known in Russia as the Great Patriotic War. The Eastern Front also proved the deadliest for Nazi Germany, with 74% of their war deaths occurring there. Almost every single Soviet family suffered the horrors of this war. Only 37% of all men drafted to the front line survived till the end of the conflict.
Now I want you to pay close attention to this information. Washington continues to prepare a global strike, according to the Deputy Foreign Minister of the Russian Federation. The United States continue its destabilizing activities. This includes the creation of a global missile defense system, the continuation of the development of tools capable of inflicting a disarming strike without using nuclear weapons. The Rapid Global Attack System of the United States provides the establishment of a hypersonic system which will be able to apply high-precision non-nuclear strikes from American territory at targets on Earth within an hour. This system will cause a non-nuclear strike, disarming strategic nuclear forces, including those of Russia. 24 generals from 13 NATO countries gather in Latvia to train joint operations. We are prepared to fight and win if we have to. NATO's focus will expand from assurance to deterrence, including measures that vastly improve NATO's overall readiness. Lithuania is hosting large-scale military exercises involving the country's forces as well as soldiers from other NATO member states. Another Baltic state, Estonia, started a major military drills involving NATO troops in the country's regions near the Russian-Estonian border. NATO is deploying an additional 4 battalions of 4,000 troops in Poland and the 3 Baltic states. Do you remember when we had in the news saying that NATO would deploy 4,000 troops to the Baltic states? And when the next day that figure increased to 4,000 NATO troops being deployed to the Baltic states. Poland is set to double size of its armed forces. The Polish army will be bigger. We envision a substantial increase in the size of the army by at least 50%. Poland's armed forces, which currently have around 95,000 personnel, would grow to 150,000 personnel. Poland launched an ambitious 10-year defense project aimed at upgrading its military forces. According to Deputy Defense Minister Czesław Mroczek, in April 2016, Poland would choose a supplier of anti-missile defense system, which will reportedly cost around $10 billion. In total, Poland was planning to spend around $42 billion on its military upgrade over the next 10 years. Poland's military modernization program includes a missile defense shield, anti-aircraft systems, submarines, combat drones, armored personnel carriers. The Georgian army has begun the 2-week Nobel partner military exercises together with American and British forces.
We're already going under a form of martial law. So let me show you some of the news we already went to in an earlier report, then I'll go to a smattering of the other evidence right here. Much of it from the Department of Defense's own website. You have massive military gear being cached, armored vehicles, machine guns, helicopters, night vision, Humvees, with the police departments around the country. California has gotten the majority of it, along with Oklahoma and other areas to population. Texas has gotten double what California's gotten, and we have 10 million less than them. Oklahoma got basically double what California got, even though the crime rates are very low, because it's about suppressing the patriot population, just like they have on the map in Jade Helm showing Texas, Utah, and other areas as hostile. This is pre-caching to fight real Americans that won't go along with gun confiscation, you name it. Now, when you see Infowars.com articles I'm going to show you, you can go directly to the site, click on it, and go to the Department of Defense's site. DOD training manual, extremist founding fathers would not be welcome in today's military. Close quote. Army-sponsored report suggests new police force. That's WorldNet Daily. What's that out of? A stability police force for the United States, RAND Corporation. This is the martial law plan that I've been covering for 18 years. War gear flows to police departments, New York Times. Feds preparing to invade Texas, list state as hostile. They are preparing, not saying they're going to invade or take over. They are preparing for the takeover. And that's in the John Warren Defense Authorization Act of 96, 97. They admit for insurrection by legislatures and governors. They just hope, just like Obamacare, you don't actually go read this stuff.
Obamacare is great, and it's really working.
We have to make sure America writes the rules of the global economy. Because if we don't write the rules for trade around the world, guess what? China will.
Why in the world we would have such strange things happening on the land of freedom? What is very strange is that we have FEMA conducting biggest drills ever inside the US. We have all those FEMA executive orders set in place. We have Walmarts closed and being converted into detention centers according to some videos on YouTube. We have an unprecedented military hardware movement inside the US. We have this movie Armageddon coming out on Friday the 13th. We have another movie called X-Men Apocalypse. We have FEMA and DHS conducting riot control drills. On top of that, do you remember those articles saying that DHS has purchased more than 2 billion rounds of ammunition, which is enough to fight a war for 10 years? Do you remember those articles saying that US government has purchased 30,000 guillotines? Do you remember red, blue, green lists? Do you remember FEMA coffins? When at the same time we have US and NATO setting up and activating missile defense shields in Eastern Europe, on Russia's doorstep, also in North Korea and inside the US. What do you think? Please share your thoughts by leaving a comment below this video.
The Kim Jong-un regime and President Trump has tension growing on the Korean peninsula right now. CNN's Brian Todd is working the story for us. Brian, North Korea is making new threats as the U.S. warships approach the region.
They certainly are, Wolf. Tonight we're told U.S. intelligence officials are watching for any signs that North Korea will conduct another nuclear or missile test in the coming days, including the birthday of Kim Jong-un's grandfather this Saturday. Now, this comes as tensions on the Korean peninsula are at their highest levels in years, with an ominous warning coming earlier today from Kim.
A stunning new look tonight at the public facade of the brutal North Korean regime. Kim Jong-un, in newly released video, strutting center stage at a gathering of his hand-picked elites, who dutifully applaud the dictator. On state TV, a fawning news anchor narrates the gathering, the Supreme People's Assembly. At the same time Kim Jong-un is conducting this show of political force, Kim's regime is warning America over the deployment of the U.S. aircraft carrier Carl Vinson and its strike group to the waters off the Korean peninsula. Calling it an act of aggression, a regime statement hand-delivered to CNN says, quote, if the U.S. dares to choose a military option, the DPRK is willing and ready to react to any mode of war desired by the U.S.
I think it's North Korea essentially saying, look, we are pursuing nuclear weapons for a reason. This is exactly why. You are the world's most powerful nuclear power. If you dare to strike us, we will strike back.
A U.S. defense official tells CNN the carrier group was sent to patrol near North Korea because of Kim's recent provocations. is missile tests and tests of engines for intercontinental ballistic missiles. Tonight, CNN is learning more specific information about what the U.S. carrier group could do off North Korea's coast if ever ordered to strike. Analysts say the Vincent Strike Group has 2 destroyers and a cruiser with more than 300 combined missile tubes. They carry the same types of Tomahawk missiles the U.S. fired into Syria and could shoot down some North Korean missiles if they're test fired.
The CG-47, the Lake Champlain, this smaller ship on the right, carries over 100 vertical launch missiles. Some of those would be equipped to be able to interdict a shorter or medium-range ballistic missile.
Will those American warships be ordered to shoot down North Korean missiles if they're test-fired while the carrier group is nearby? Pentagon officials won't comment. But the movement of the warships comes as President Trump tweets North Korea is looking for trouble, and that if China doesn't help, quote, we will solve the problem without them. Experts worry tonight about a point of no return for the tough-talking leaders of the U.S. and North Korea.
The two leaders could indeed be headed for a collision course, essentially a game of chicken. And many worry that once they're on this path, there's no U-turn or left turn or stop.
And don't look for China to help steer the two leaders off that path, despite President Trump's messages to China, even saying that a Chinese trade deal with the U.S. would be better for Beijing if it helps with North Korea. The Chinese president has made no promises of specific action to rein in Kim Jong-un. Wolf?
Brian, how vulnerable is that U.S. aircraft carrier strike force to a potential North Korean attack if Kim's regime decides to go after it?
Well, Wolf, there are 3 things that Kim could throw at that carrier group. He could throw ballistic missiles, attack planes, and submarines. But one weapons expert tells us the Vincent Strike Group is ready for all 3. He says North Korea's missiles are not sophisticated enough to hit the carrier group before they would be blasted out of the sky. North Korean planes wouldn't stand a chance against the American attack planes on the carrier. And he says the U.S. would deploy attack submarines along with the carrier group, which could detect and take out North Korean subs, which this expert says are very noisy.
Brian Todd reporting for us. Thanks very much, Brian. A final story for us tonight, the cost of President Trump's...
Welcome to the Trump Breaking News Network, your daily source for up-to-the-minute Trump news. Join us today and every day. Here's today's news.
This is TBNN.
Trump's North Korea options: place nukes in South Korea or kill Kim Jong-un. By Tyler Durden. With Syria down, it's now North Korea's turn. According to NBC News, the National Security Council has presented the suddenly ragingly bellicose President Trump with several options to respond to North Korea's nuclear program: put American nukes in South Korea or kill dictator Kim Jong-un. The scenarios were prepared in advance of Trump's meeting with Chinese President Xi Jinping this week. The White House has expressed hopes the Chinese will do more to influence Pyongyang through diplomacy and enhanced sanctions, but if that fails, and North Korea continues its development of nuclear weapons, there are other options on the table that would significantly alter U.S. policy. While General John Hyten, the commander of U.S. Strategic Command, maintained on Wednesday that any solution to the North Korea problem has to involve China, a senior intel official told NBC he doubted U.S. and China could find a diplomatic solution to the crisis. We have 20 years of diplomacy and sanctions under our belt that has failed to stop the North Korean program, said the official involved in the review. I'm not advocating preemptive war, nor do I think that the deployment of nuclear weapons buys more for us than it costs, but he stressed that the U.S. was dealing with a war-today situation. The nuclear option would mark the first overseas nuclear deployment since the end of the Cold War, a move that would promptly provoke global condemnation, not least of all by China. It was not immediately clear if South Korea's regime, in turmoil recently following the recent impeachment and arrest of ex-President Park, had been consulted with the proposed strategy. The U.S. withdrew all nuclear weapons from South Korea 25 years ago. This option is also facing domestic pushback. I don't think that deploying nuclear weapons is a good idea. I think that it will only inflame the view from Pyongyang, retired Admiral James Stavridis and former NATO commander told NBC News. I don't see any upside to it because the idea that we would use a nuclear weapon even against North Korea is highly unlikely. South Korea's sentiment aside, NBC notes that the U.S. Air Force leadership doesn't necessarily support putting nuclear weapons in South Korea. As an alternative, it's been practicing sorties right out of the depths of the Cold War, long-range strikes with strategic bombers, sending them to the region for exercises and deploying them in Guam and on the peninsula as a show of force. The second, and just as controversial option, is to kill North Korean leader Kim Jong-un and other senior leaders in charge of the country's nuclear program. The overt regime overthrow option has huge downsides, said Mark Lippert, the former U.S. ambassador to South Korea, who also served as an assistant defense secretary under President Barack Obama. Discussions of regime change and decapitation tends to cause the Chinese great pause of concern and tends to have them move in the opposite direction we would like them to move in terms of pressure, he said. Quoted by NBC, Stavridis said that decapitation is always a tempting strategy when you're faced with a highly unpredictable and highly dangerous leader, especially for a nation like the U.S. He did not add. The question you have to ask yourself, he said, is what happens the day after you decapitate? I think that in North Korea, it's an enormous unknown. In any case, the groundwork has already been laid, as reported 1 month ago. Elite U.S. forces, including Delta Force and SEAL Team 6, have been conducting drills on taking out Kim Jong-un, as well as practicing tactical North Korea infiltration. All they need is the green light. A third, bonus option, is covert action, infiltrating U.S. and South Korean special forces into North Korea to sabotage or take out key infrastructure, for instance, blowing up bridges to block the movement of mobile missiles. The CIA, which would oversee such operations, told NBC News it could offer no guidance on this option. But Stavridis said that he felt it was the best strategy should the U.S. be forced to take military action. He described such action as some combination of special forces with South Korea and cyber. One wonders if the CIA creating a false flag attack on South Korea, or China, using chemical weapons was one of the options under consideration. Trump has already indicated he's open to unilateral action if China fails to rein in its ally, telling the Financial Times last weekend, "If China is not going to solve North Korea, we will." Until last night, his words were largely dismissed as more bluster. However, having just demonstrated how quickly Trump is willing to launch offensive operations, having U-turned on his Syrian position in less than a week, suddenly the possibility of nuclear war with an irrational adversary does not look all that distant.
That's the news. Join us here every day. Be sure to subscribe and click the bell. See you next time.
This is TBNN.